know what you know.
Yeah, Spock, good stuff. I like it. I like it. You know, it's interesting. I watch little documentaries on TV shows and where they were made. And for some reason, I always get this instinctive feeling. I always seem to know when they were shot at the Paramount lots. I don't know how I know that, but I'm almost always right because I spent a lot of time at the Paramount lot. It was very strange. Well, let's talk to a man who could have a TV show all about his work. Eric Peters in the sunlight. We're here in the clouds here in Moscow. Hi, Eric, and thanks for joining us, man. I got the window over here. I can see you there, and I'll say hi to you on the camera there, and then I'll open it up so I can see you on the screen as well. Thank you for being here. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper, my friend. Glad we could hook up again.
Yeah, I hope I didn't keep you waiting too long, man.
No, not at all. Not at all. Let's start by saying, or recalling the words of Emperor Hirohito, who said, I think he said in August or July of 1945, that the war is not necessarily proceeding to our advantage.
Oh man! Thank you for bringing in the historical context with the laughter, and it is dark humor, obviously, because these joke clown comments, and again, these people are not stupid people. So all I can think of is that they utterly dismiss us with complete contempt. They think we're the stupid ones, I guess.
Oh, no question, absolutely. Yeah, and it's not. It's for the first time ever. They're not even making a pretense of pretending to be other than what they are. It's just completely out of the closet. The article that I posted earlier today about this fiasco that's going on over there quoted Trump talking about how I don't have any concern, about the impact of the war on gas prices. Well, naturally, he's a billionaire in the first place. And in the second place, you and I are paying for his gas, his choppers, his jet airplanes, and never mind the sumptuous banquets that he has in the biggest ballroom ever,
right.
if that thing's ever going to get built. So just, remember when Jimmy Carter put on his sweater during the energy crisis, like in 1977?
Turn those thermostats down, everybody.
At least Jimmy pretended to kind of empathize.
Yeah.
Hey, I get it. I know you guys are having trouble paying your heating bill. So I'm turning down the thermostat here at the White House and I'm putting on my sweater. I mean, it was a sop, granted, but at least it was sort of an acknowledgement to some extent of normalcy. Yeah. Whereas, the belligerence of Trump is just quite something to behold.
Oh, it really it's amazing too, because as a person who covers politics, wrote so many things for MRC TV, and you're every day at ericpetersautos.com putting out new articles many times a day. You think you've become acclimated to the level of corruption and utter contempt that they have. And then it just hits you like a tsunami. Like, I was not prepared for this. This is way beyond what I ever imagined they could. Like, I think somebody said I think it might have been with Glenn Dyson or it might have been with Danny Haiphong. Somebody said, and other people have done variations of this. Like they said, at least with Biden and at least with George H.W. Bush and the Colin Powell thing, they took up the pretense to try to manufacture something that sounded like a plausible lie. They don't even do it now. They're switching every hour. It's like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. One time it's a giant mutant star goat. The other time their sun's going to explode. They just make it up as they go. It's Calvin Ball.
I think I figured out why. I think it's because they've realized they can get away with it.
Yeah.
There is no accountability, that nothing that they do is going to result in any consequences for them.
Yeah. That's right.
Point.
There's a really pertinent comment. I want to show the screen, Eric, and we won't have to worry about any echo or anything like that coming up. I want to show the screen because Nostradamus has this. The witch trials in Salem, Mass. are no different than what Trump is doing to Iran. Donnie might as well accuse Iran of being a witch, then let them defend themselves. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely right. And it shows their utter contempt for us. And look, if we were over there, I'm sure they wouldn't care whether we got killed or not. They just, we would be, some sort of damage that they would claim was all part of the larger recipe for making their great dinner. And that's it, To
me, the most interesting aspect of it is that Trump is contemptuous of his own base, and that leads me along a certain train of thought to think that he is unconcerned about political ramifications. And what does that imply? Remember that this is the same man who declared an.
Oh, did we lose you? I think we lost you. We lost you for just a second there, and the audience might not have lost you, but I lost you for just a second. Yeah, you said, remember, this is a man, and then I lost you a little bit.
Yeah, he declared an emergency in 2020 and kept it in place, even though it was apparent by the summer of 2020 that the whole thing was overhyped, overblown, not necessary. Nonetheless, he kept it in place, leaving in place the legal framework for the pushing of the beautiful vaccines, right? Yeah. And also for the selection of Joe Biden, who tormented the country for 4 years. You know, he could have prevented that, or at least done something to try to make it less likely to happen, but he didn't. So what now? You know, this is the same man who has publicly said that he kind of admires Vladimir Zelensky, you know, who is a dictator who canceled the elections by declaring an emergency.
Right.
So what's going to happen as this war drags on, and we get to the point where gas gets up to $6-7 a gallon, and diesel is $8 a gallon. Food goes up by 30 or 40%, and there starts to be civil unrest. It's an emergency. I'm declaring an emergency. And then we've got all these ICE goons already out, you know, in American cities, you know, just conveniently there, and people have gotten used to seeing that.
Yeah.
And then no midterms. You know, I know that might sound a little bit much for some people listening to us. I don't think it is.
No, especially after, you know, you laid the tracks back, you know, 6 years ago to, you know, April 2020, when Trump came out there and laid down his Friday the 13th, there's an emergency, and then brought Fauci out and the other members of the Lollipop Guild, and they started to tell us that we had to take our mRNA lollipops in the land of Oz. Yep. You nailed it, dude. That's exact. If they, you know, and it's interesting. I don't know about you. It's not that I'm willing to give somebody a second chance, because I'm completely divorced from all of that political world. But I think after a while, you get so many of these things, and there are so many of these nefarious characters that after covering Biden for 4 years, when I was doing it for MRC TV, I will occasionally bring up the mRNA jabs and, you know, how Trump started the whole domino thing for the lockdowns and all those things, and the PPP and the CARES Act and the money that went out to all those people. But bringing it up right now within this context really is a stark reminder. It's like, look, the guy is a sociopath. Yeah. He's very clearly a sociopath. There's no denying this. And he showed us already in 2020.
And it's not just him. You know, it's the sycophants around him. There's nobody of any integrity that I can think of, other than maybe Thomas Massey and maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has said, wait a minute, this is not right. And this is certainly not what MAGA was supposed to have represented, and are trying to actively take a principled stand, not just for MAGA, but for the Constitution, for crying out loud.
Oh, so right. You know, it's and there's so much to say about that, which goes into different darts that one can throw on the map of various presidents through the years that I think are important to remember. But within our context, let me fly over to your article over at Eric Peters Autos, Eric. I'm going to do it the clicker because you're not supposed to point. Clicker. It's the political clicker. So over at Eric Peters Autos, everybody, you've got this. If the Iranians attack here, and this is a substantial piece of writing, and could you give us some information on this first before we go into it? I'm sure many of the people in the audience have already read it. I put it in my news notes today. Tell us what it's about and what inspired you, obviously, but what angle you decided, you know, I've got to write about this.
Well, the thing that got me writing about it was, let's go back to the predicate when we started the show and talked about that Emperor Hirohito quote. You know, I think they thought, Trump and the people around him, Hegseth and so on, that this would be another Venezuela type operation, that all they had to do was knock off the Ayatollah, and maybe they believed their own propaganda, that the Iranian people are going to rise up and throw off the regime, and Trump will get to parade around like Augustus, you know, the great conqueror. It hasn't worked out. If anything, killing the Ayatollah and his family, including his granddaughter and all those schoolgirls at the school that was bombed, has stiffened the resolve of the Iranians. And any idiot could have seen that from the Iranian point of view, even with that stuff set aside, that this is an existential question for them as a nation. that they understand that if they lose this, they lose everything. They become a vassal state. They become some kind of pathetic amusement park for Jared Kushner and his friends and Bibi Netanyahu to exploit. That's what it's going to be for them. So they're going to fight. They're going to fight hard, and that's exactly what they're doing. And they have managed to win so far by not losing. So what next? What's coming? Well, the American public is rapidly souring on this whole thing. They didn't like it to begin with. There has never been great support for this war because it's just so incandescently contrary to any discernible American interest and a complete opposition with everything that Trump campaigned on.
Yeah.
So it got me to thinking, what could potentially happen? And then you start to hear the chatter. People use that term, on the internet, the news, and everything about how the Iranians are, they're planning an attack on the West Coast. They're gonna hit us with drones or something. I put nothing past the people who got us into this war in the first place, and I think it's entirely conceivable that they could contrive some sort of an attack. I don't think the Iranians are going to do it. I think it's going to be our intelligence agencies in cahoots with probably the Israeli intelligence agencies. And they'll do it and think that if they do that, what they'll be able to do is jumpstart the flag humping, Bible beating patriotism like we had back during the days of 9/11. George Bush was not a popular president, and then 9/11 happened, and everybody got behind this regime change operation in Iraq, which was something that the Israeli government had wanted to do for a very long time. I foresee something like that happening again. I think that, let's just say they managed to detonate a so-called dirty bomb, one of those radioactive bombs, not so much a mushroom cloud, but a radioactive bomb that dumps lethal radiation in a crowded area, kills a lot of people. Yeah. And, then Trump declares an emergency. Look, we got to lock it down because there are evildoers amongst us. Yeah. It's an it literally does keep me up at night. I'm not sleeping very well lately on account of thinking about this sort of stuff, because I think it's entirely possible. The worse the war goes, the longer it goes on, the more desperate these people are going to get, because it's just as consequential for the state of Israel as it is for the United States. If Iran manages to survive, it will be devastating to the prestige of the United States. I mean, my God, we weren't able to defeat the Iranians. And Israel, which has loved this image that it's had of being sort of the impossible to defeat country in the Middle East. If it's seen as having lost to the Iranians, that might be the end of the Israeli state potentially. So they know that, and they're not. They've painted themselves into a corner now. They can't get out, not without extreme humiliation. And so, the talk has been, well, maybe they're going to do something completely crazy, like use a nuclear weapon against the Iranians. And I think it's entirely possible that something like that is under consideration.
I've been hearing a lot more people talking about that, whether they're people formerly with military intelligence or others. You see folks like Scott Ritter or Larry Johnson or Ray McGovern talking about how worried they are, the most worried they've ever been since their time as younger guys during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And, Eric, when I was over at Star Trek, and I haven't been accused of putting forward any sort of what would you call this? Cultural programming or anything like that from the work that I've done in my fiction. I wrote that story called Whitechapel, and in this story, I had a pandemic and I had 6 foot distancing and all these different things, and shops closed down and stuff. And I was just extrapolating. But we used to sit in the writer's room at Star Trek Voyager, and part of the job of a science fiction writer would be to try to imagine, based on what we know for science, what could be a danger, what could be a problem that these guys have to face, viruses, super nanoparticles, that sort of stuff, all these different things that then you start to do the research and you find out, yes, they're working on these things. This is something we can use, and we can put forward our own worry inside the stories, right? And some people think that, that's sort of, trying to get people prepared, that you're part of this and so on. The writers that I knew were just trying to extrapolate, and they were worried. And I think that it doesn't take somebody who is doing his job as a writer they don't have that particularly unique talent. I think there are probably millions of people who are doing the same thing, wondering what could happen. Could it be a dirty bomb? Could there be something else that they release? Could it be a smaller piece of sabotage? I got something in the text today, and I'll show you. In fact, go to my phone. I got this from Ferb out in Utah, sent this over to me. It was a link about a company called Strikers in Michigan. And it says Strikers Cork base impacted by global cyber attack. The Cork base of medical technology company Stryker with a Y has been impacted, as they use that term, by a global cyber attack targeting the firm's operations. The National Cybersecurity Center said it is aware of the incident and is liaising with international colleagues. For what's that's worth, doesn't matter. The Iran-linked hacking group claimed responsibility. So whether it was really an Iran-linked group or it was a CIA-linked group posing as an Iran-linked group, we don't know. But it said it was a sweeping cyber attack on U.S. medical technology giant Stryker, saying that this group had wiped out more than 200,000 systems and extracted 50 terabytes of data in retaliation for military strikes in Iran. Quote, "Our major cyber operation has been executed with complete success," the group called Handala said in a statement, describing the attack as retaliation for what it called the brutal attack on the Manab school and for ongoing cyber assaults against the infrastructure of the Axis of Resistance. So much like the Stuxnet virus against their nuclear power, which could have harmed many, many people. The group said it had shut down Stryker offices in 79 countries and that all extracted data was, quote, now in the hands of the free people of the world. Handala issued an open warning to what it described as Zionist leaders and their lobbies, adding, quote, "This is only the beginning of a new chapter of cyber warfare." Now, again, I wouldn't put it past the federal government, especially with Trump's announcement a week ago of his new cyber agenda, to see that this is the U.S. doing a false flag.
Yeah.
But this would affect a lot of manufacturers of medical devices that are used for all sorts of things. It says here, they make all sorts of things. I'm not sure exactly where it is in the article, but they make things for all sorts of folks, like measuring things for diabetes and hospitals and things like that. So
I think the Iranians have been playing their hand quite well. They have been very judicious in attacking, for example, military targets outside of Israel, the bases. Of course, there's this braying unction about how dare they, but the point I'm trying to make is I don't think the Iranians are dumb. And how would it be in their interests to stage an attack on the United States here in this country? Why would that? All that would do is gin up support for the war against Iran. I don't think they're idiots. Right. That's why I don't think the Iranians are going to do it. And I think if it happens, it's going to be done by somebody else who's trying to pin the tail on the Iranian donkey.
Exactly. It's just like when they accused Assad of gassing his own people. That would have been the exact worst thing for him to have done at the time when they threatened him, don't use gas against your own people. All of a sudden, he uses gas against his own people. Yep. Exactly what I was thinking about the Iranians. They would not want to engage in anything like this when already they're caught in a battle for their existence, and they need to survive on their grounds. I think that's extremely important. And I also think that given the fatwa that they have had against using nuclear weapons, and part of the reason was because nuclear weapons harm innocent people, I think they try to avoid as much as possible, just based on religious and within the Shiite religion. I believe that they probably try to avoid that as much as possible, unless they're finally driven to their own large-scale existence being really existentially threatened. So I think that the sun is going to continue in that tradition as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, though, the worry is that Israel and the United States have painted us into a corner.
Yeah.
How do they de-escalate at this point? How do you climb back down? To have some sort of a brokered peace and say, okay, return to the status quo. I don't think that the maniacs, particularly in charge in Israel, and some of these doomsaying eschatological end times Christian people, frankly,
Yeah.
Like Pete Hegseth, who literally has been telling the troops that, we need to slay the Iranians because it's going to herald the return of Jesus. They think that they're trying to bring about the end of the world, literally want to do that.
It's absolutely crazy. And they close themselves off to the fact that they've been fooled, to the fact that they're committing just incredibly immoral acts. And, it brings me back to the use of the nuclear bomb in World War II, which was not necessary. And, and the way that, Roosevelt communicated with Churchill before the U.S. entered World War II and said, I'll do anything to get the Americans to go along with the British cause in World War II. And, you just to think about that that there are people who think that way is scary. In your piece, in fact, you mentioned, what happens if I'll just go over here and I'll show this. You say, well, what if a mushroom cloud does arise, or it's less dramatic, but just as consequential, or sibling, a dirty bomb, as you mentioned. That is to say, a bomb that spreads lethal radioactivity around the downtown area of a major American city, resulting in many horrible, slow deaths from radiation poisoning. All of a sudden, the war Trump started for the sake of Israel could become even more popular than the chimp was. Just like that, the day after 9/11. People forget that the chimp W was not popular before 9/11, nor was there much support for going to war against Iraq. Then presto, there was. A good detective would ask, who benefits? Who will benefit if the Iranians attack the West Coast, LA, or anywhere else? It won't be Iran. It won't be Americans either. They will likely be subjected to something far more draconian than COVID, which everyone seems to want to forget. Never mind that the guilty have not been punished for what they did. Eric, I mean, hats off to you. I don't know how, you compose your stuff, but you just were right in there punching. Really
coffee great. and just outrage, I guess, are the fuel that I have. I wish I didn't have to write these things. I'd love to be able to just concentrate on writing about fun things like cars, hot rodding stuff and motorcycles and the things that I'm passionate about. But I feel compelled to do this. I every day now is Groundhog Day for me. I feel like I'm reliving two things at once. The immediate aftermath of 9/11 and the war on terror, and when America became a homeland, and also all this COVID nonsense. The same sort of mindless hysteria is being whipped up again, and with great destructive consequences. And I truly hope that this time the people of this country will see it and will not fall for it if it happens, and will not, roar and cheer to the strains of Lee Greenwood and that odious song that Trump plays at every one of his rallies, and sign up to fight for freedom again as we descend into an even more dark realm of the police state that we've been living in for the past 25 years.
Eric, I think about being a young person, seeing generations ahead of us and what they sacrificed and the courage that, they had to have. And what I think is interesting is, as I go about this, I realize that part of maybe a system that incorporates some form of courage or something is just getting a standard to just keep your head down and keep going, bite the bottom lip and just keep going with a certain degree of humility. And of course, contempt, checked with humility to make sure that if I'm making an error, I try to be as open as possible. And this contempt fuels what I try to do and makes me recognize how much people sacrificed in the past, and how much people I don't even know what they're going through. And I can't even imagine. So just keep my head down.
Beyond just economic stuff, that it's also, I really deeply resent the way we've been played and used and leveraged against one another. During COVID, you had people like me who questioned it and didn't put on the mask, and who were treated as pariahs for having done that. And I, luckily for me, I was a self-employed person, so I didn't risk my job. But there were people who got fired, because they wouldn't put on the mask, or they wouldn't wear, or they wouldn't get the jab. I have a friend of mine who lost his business over this stuff. Very serious, very real consequences. And here we go again, potentially. And this time it's literally life and death. I wonder what will happen if Trump declares a draft, and because we need 500,000 ground troops, according to people I've listened to, like Colonel Doug McGregor, to successfully invade Iran. If we're going to pursue such a lunatic course of action, 500,000 troops, where are they going to come from? Well, they're going to have to come from a draft.
Yep.
And, are Americans going to tolerate that? Seeing their children sent off to this stupid war again, to come back without their legs and arms and psychologically destroyed for life if they're even alive.
Well, it's like you say, if they give us a false flag served up on that dinner table, then many people will lap it up like they're hungry.
I guess they will. I suppose they will. And, another thing that has me worried now, too, it again brings me back to the experience of COVID. It is almost impossible to get real news about what's going on over there.
Yeah.
And no matter where you turn, the media has become so co-opted. The internet has become so co-opted.
Yeah.
You have to go to sources like India and Russia, to get video of what's actually happening on the ground in Israel, to get a sense of how bad the damage is over there, and also to U.S. bases. We have no idea how many Americans have actually been killed over there. They won't tell us.
No.
So, we're not allowed to know.
No.
And the degree to which they've been able to lock things down on that is quite something.
And I was mentioning in David's chat that now I'm taking a second step back when I'm seeing videos and things like that, because, virtually anything can be created with AI now, even to the point where a year ago at this time, I was aware of it, but I'm hyper aware of it now because I'm thirsting for quick information. And I have to realize I have certain sources that I think have shown themselves that they themselves are extremely careful. So I think I can rely on those folks, Max Blumenthal, the judge, other people like that. Then I say, okay, what am I seeing online? And then there's a bit of a vetting process that, if you wait a little while, you're like, okay, I think this is okay. But it is very, very difficult to get any assessment, especially, as you say, any information that's coming out from on the ground there, until after a while, maybe some of that literal and proverbial dust settles. Eric, if I can, I'd like to take you on a journey with me to a couple stories as my co-pilot on the show. And I want to get your feedback on these things, if it's okay. Can you spend that time with us?
Yeah,
excellent. Okay. All right. So, folks, remember Eric's site, ericpetersautos.com, if the Iranians attack here. And there's another major piece that I want to discuss, plus a bunch of really, really cool ones, just basically about car technology that I wanted to mention too. So I want to go over here. Eric, you heard us talk about the new Ayatollah, of course, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, and how he has come around with basically what I think many people who are trying to protect their homeland and their families and have seen death directly brought to their families would think or say. So there he is. But I also want to mention this. Benny Johnson, the MAGA flack, maybe he didn't seem to understand what he was posting. But it said, in the realm of human affairs, where the sovereignty of each soul demands freedom from the coercive edicts of politicians, President Trump's proclamation of so-called victory in the conflict with Iran rings hollow. Of course, he drew that back. On Wednesday, he declared, we've won the war against Iran. Yet evidently, no one informed the Iranians themselves. So here's Benny Johnson, who has millions of people who adore Donald Trump, now also adoring him. Operation Epic Fury. Is that a great name? Well, it's only good if you win, and we've won. Yes, they said, sir, pick the name. So I want to ask you, Eric, I'm going to play this audio. Bring your audio down. I want to ask you, when people are applauding Donald Trump in that background there, do you think they know, and I don't want to be critical of these people, but do you think they're aware of what the United States has been doing to Iran since 1953? Let's hear Donald.
Operation Epic Fury.
I'll stop it there and get your opinions, Eric, and bring you back in on the mic there.
What do you think? It's fifth grade jingoism. I doubt that 1 out of 100, if there were 100 people in that audience that they trucked in from God only knows where among his ever dwindling base, would be able to tell you who Mohammad Mossadegh was. let alone any of the other predicates to the infamous 1979 Iranian Revolution and the hostage situation over there at the American Embassy. They are utterly illiterate and ignorant of all of these events, and they have this kind of infantile, cartoonish perception that's been purveyed to them. Literally, sort of like a little cartoon of an evil, nefarious person wearing a black suit, and over here, this person is the good guy wearing the white suit, and they can be interchangeable. You wonder whether they have any memory, for example, of the fact that for decades, how long was Saddam Hussein a great friend of the United States? Donald Rumsfeld would go over there and have tea and crumpets with him. Right. And then when he became inconvenient, all of a sudden he became Saddam.
Yeah. Then they accuse him of having chemical weapons that the U.S. gave him to kill Iranians.
Yeah, as if they did not know what kind of a man he was the whole time that they supported him. He was useful to them for a period of time. So he was an ally. And when he no longer became useful, then he became disposable.
Yeah.
Morality does not enter into it. And it's the same with regard to what they're doing to people, the people of Iran, and have been doing. There's no knowledge of the fact that the Shah of Iran, who was installed as a puppet by the United States, was a vicious, horrible dictator who employed a secret police, the Savak, which would round people up and torture them and abuse them and disappear them. And, the Iranians, the people, finally spontaneously erupted in uncontained fury about that and deposed the Shah.
Right.
And that's why there's an Ayatollah and a religious theocracy over there right now, because it was a backlash to what the United States had been doing to the Iranians for the prior 30 years.
It's incredible. It's such a terrible form of gaslighting, and it's generational, where they brought people up thinking that the Iranians are the enemy for no reason other than the Iranians' responses to decade upon decade upon decade of United States CIA coups, overthrows, assassinations, all sorts of things. And now we've got 176 people. I wrote here, when told that his own sub-agencies, and this is what we showed before, admitted that U.S. arms slaughtered 176 people, mostly small children, in Manab, Iran, on the first day of the immoral U.S. aggression, Trump simply dismissed it. And those people, are those kids in their minds? I don't understand. Don't they have kids and grandkids? What the heck is wrong with them?
He's such a sociopath. He's so like tone deaf. Yeah. He doesn't even recognize that it would be in his own cynical self-interest to at least say something like, we're very sorry that this happened. It's unfortunate. It wasn't intentional. We send our condolences to the families of the children that were killed. Yeah. Something like that.
Then, absolutely right. And then, there seems to be this sense, and you'll see this coming up on the screen in just a minute, but there seems to be this sense of comfort in the idea that the United States is the superpower, that the United States government can be the avatar and the expressor of all that is just and honest. And so therefore, if you have been depicted as the bad guys by the clean and lily white United States government, then clearly you must be the bad guys. You don't conform to our interpretation of the order of the world. So you're going to have to fit in. And you better not in any way go up against Donald Trump's plans, because Donald Trump will destroy you. Even though, of course, Donald Trump is completely removed from reality, and nobody who knows anything about anything when it comes to security, history of Iran, shipping, oil prices, or anything would pay attention to the guy, because they know he's lying. It's stunning.
Lying, and if the effrontery of him, it almost beggars articulation. Did you catch his comment about how the ship captains and shipping companies, they need to buck up and be manly, and put their ships and their lives at risk by going through this from Captain Bone Spurs, who seriously dodged the draft, and it's a relevant point. Yeah. This gerontocracy of chicken hawks that runs this country, and that is bellicose and willing to sacrifice other people's lives and other people's treasure for whatever their particular agenda is. They don't even perceive how that comes off to people. And sure. Let's you and him fight. You go ahead and put your neck on the chopping block. You go ahead and risk everything you have.
You nail. In fact, I might have put it in the news notes that it's like a weakling on the playground standing next to a bully, saying, yeah, come after me, he'll fight you, you know. And I've experienced that myself in rhetorical disagreements with people. They'll be like, yeah, well, I disagree with you, so argue with that guy. It's like, no, you're the one who disagrees with me. Why don't you argue with me? I don't understand. Like, you must have a reason to do it, so do it, you know. It's so stupid.
He's a titanic ignoramus, you know, and he thinks that, among other things, yeah, we have plenty of oil here in America, and now we have more oil in Venezuela. But, you know, leaving aside all the cynical calculations about seizing other people's stuff, it's going to take quite some time to get that oil out of Venezuela and get it into the proverbial pipeline. You know, and meanwhile, the world economy is probably going to collapse as a result of everything that's going on over there.
Yeah, and you know, Eric, it's funny because yesterday I went through some of the information because I had written a lot during the Biden administration about how they had not opened a new refinery since the 1970s. So I went back and wrote a piece for my news notes about it yesterday and put that out there. It's been since 1977, although they've expanded some refineries in the U.S. Trump, just over the past week, again, sort of this, we'll put some information out that's already been extant, but we'll make a claim for our own success with it, and then that will affect oil prices. So he puts out this announcement, just like he put out the announcement of we'll indemnify shippers if they go into a stinking war zone. Nobody's going to take them up on that, and that sees the price of oil go down a little bit. Like, they're constantly trying to somehow tread water as the waves that they create keep coming up. So they deflect and they lie. Now they've just recently lied about, well, we've got a new refinery coming online in Brownsville, Texas. It's like, no, they haven't even broken ground on it. That won't start until June or July. They just put an announcement out, and the actual plans were set in 2024 under Biden. It's the first new plan.
He's a salesman.
Yeah.
And a greasy one. You know, I'm not disparaging all salesmen, but he is the kind of salesman that gives salesmen a bad name. He's a con man.
Yeah.
You know, what he does is he talks up his product. It's the best. It's the most beautiful. You know, it's the greatest ever. You know, and I guess people lap that up. They hear some loudmouth talk about how whatever it is that he's selling is the best, the most beautiful, the greatest ever. And they go, oh, gee, okay, I guess I got to have some of that.
Yeah. And I wanted to show this, Eric, because it just fits in with what you were saying, the footage of the two oil tankers, additional footage of the oil tankers. This is what the oil tankers have to consider, the captains of the boats. They've got to think this through when Donald Trump gives them that idiocy. Amazing. And of course, the Iranians put that information out there as a warning to say, look, we're controlling the waterways. And now, of all things, as I noted here, a stark reminder that political decrees from U.S. warmongers can't secure passage through vital waterways. And the Trump lie that the U.S. would escort ships is being revealed as such, revealed by the U.S. Navy. So here's the U.S. Navy from Reuters, from the 10th, actually saying, Navy tells shipping industry Hormuz escorts are not possible.
These people, they're both evil and they're ignorant. You know, they're not serious people. I like to listen to Doug McGregor because he is encyclopedic. He's a man who's got depth.
Yeah,
he really knows what he's talking about. I don't know whether you're a follower of his he's very, very insightful because he's got the facts at his command. He knows a lot about this stuff. And apparently Trump hasn't got anybody like him in his orbit because Trump doesn't like people like that in his orbit. He doesn't like peer equals. He doesn't like people who might say, well, Mr. President, you're wrong about that, and here's why, and here are the facts.
Yeah.
He just wants sycophants who are going to say, yes, it's the greatest thing ever. Operation Epic Fury. We've just pounded them into the dust. We've pounded them. Look at how badly we've pounded them.
Right, exactly. And then they have the gall to use the We Fit characters to make it into a cartoon. I mean, that's just, it's not even taking life seriously. You know, it's a video game for them. Eric, I want to get your thoughts.
He's a buffoon. And that's, it's bad enough that we have people who are evil, but to have buffoons, evil buffoons,
right,
in the show, it is, I know it's kind of become a cliche, but it's no less true for being so. that movie Idiocracy. Remember, what was it, President Hector Camacho, whatever the heck his name was?
Right,
That's
right.
kind of what we've got right now. I'm surprised Trump doesn't come out, to a press briefing with with an automatic rifle like that.
Donald Trump couldn't be here today. Terry Crews is sitting in for Donald Trump today. I know. Maybe Donald Trump can do an ad for Old Spice later. Block, something like that. I want to ask you, Eric, about the petroleum reserves.
Yeah.
Because, again, that's another one where they put forward a narrative to try to keep the oil prices low. And as we know, Trump and Besson, I mentioned that. I think Besson is aware of what they're doing. I don't know if Trump is aware of what they're doing to try to make oil prices so high that it hurts the Europeans even more than it's hurting the Americans. But what they're trying to tell people, that somehow the United States is going to fare thee well with bringing in all sorts of new sources of oil, is completely bogus. And it's partially shown by the fact that they were opening up 172 million barrels of the United States portion of the International Energy Agency's petroleum reserves. So I want to show you a little bit of what I wrote and just get your thoughts on this. Oh, the kitty cat, so good. I love it. Okay, so I said, first, how about a tax-funded entity not compete against consumers at any time to buy fuel and keep it locked up or release fuel later? Second, the so-called reserve stockpile that Trump announced they're going to tap is virtually meaningless when it comes to practical use in the market and price effects. The announced release from U.S. strategic reserves, more precisely, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, involves the United States contributing 172 million barrels as part of a broader Coordinated International Energy Agency, IEA, effort to about 30 different countries, effort totaling 400 million barrels from member nations' emergency stocks. This drawdown aims to offset supply disruptions tied to the ongoing U.S.-Israeli generated aggression against Iran and attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. Official statements from the Department of Energy indicate that the U.S. portion will begin deliveries next week and take approximately 120 days to fully enter the market. So that's fairly obvious, but then you actually get down to it and it's just basically thimble after thimble after thimble. So just to finish off, this timeline reflects practical constraints. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve's infrastructure allows only a maximum initial withdrawal rate of about 4.4 million barrels per day for up to 90 days. So, after which the rates taper. But actual releases in recent history have averaged closer to only 1 million to 2 million barrels. So the announced pace for this 172 million barrel release, the effective average is going to be about 1.4 million barrels per day over those 120 days. For context, on the reserve itself, as of early March 2026, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve holds approximately 415 million barrels out of the authorized 714 million, because, of course, it was only half full after Biden. After this drawdown, the U.S. inventory would drop to about 243 million barrels. To illustrate duration in broader terms, if one were to hypothetically apply the full 172 million barrels they promise against average U.S. crude oil and petroleum product consumption, currently around 20 to 21 million barrels per day, data and projections for 2026 show that it would theoretically cover 8 to 9 days total.
Yep.
It's just painful. And they think people are taking that seriously.
It's so destructive and so chaotic. And, I think that's part of the reason why so many people, me among them at any rate, are feeling kind of despairing and despondent about it. Because what we wanted, what we expected, what we hoped for at any rate, was a return to some degree of normalcy, by getting Trump back in. I know that in retrospect, that was a stupidly naive thing to believe. But, the Biden years were completely chaotic, with the summer of love, all the LGBTQ stuff, all of those things. And people were just tired of it, and they just wanted some kind of semblance of normalcy back.
Absolutely.
And now we're getting worse than what we had during COVID, and potentially with unimaginably worse yet to come. Can you imagine what this country will look like if and a few weeks from now, potentially, the crude goes over $200 a barrel, as the Iranians have promised that they're going to do. And the price of unleaded regular goes up to $7 or $8 a gallon. It already is that high in California, apparently.
Yeah.
And diesel, and this is something that's not talked about enough, in my opinion. Diesel right now, at least in my area, is $5 a gallon, and it's higher in other parts of the country. People don't put the two things together. What you get at the store is generally shipped by heavy trucks and by trains that are powered by diesel engines.
Right.
So, it's going to be like a double whammy. It's not just that you're paying that much more to fill up your vehicle's tank. Soon you're going to be paying more for food. And remember, diesel is critical to agriculture too, both to fertilizers and to the machinery that is used to grow and harvest crops on a mass scale.
Right.
Potentially we're going to see the cost of food go through the roof. At the same time, the cost of gas and diesel for our vehicles goes through the roof. It's going to be catastrophic. People can't take this.
Eric, these ramifications are incalculable right now, obviously, but it's a clearly geometric or exponential upward trend. I think that's going to be clear. And, I'm reminded when we were kids in the 70s, you mentioned Jimmy Carter. We knew about the gas lines and things like that. When I heard that Saturday that the United States had attacked Iran, I immediately bought a couple weeks worth of canned foods and things like that. And I'm going to go out and buy some more. The prices already have gone up, I'm sure, by the time I go to the store again tomorrow. I'd like to get your thoughts, Eric, on this, your expert opinion on this. Our guest, folks, in our mind meld is Eric Peters of Eric Peters Autos. Go to ericpetersautos.com. Follow him as Apostate 27832. I got it locked in. It's because of the brain chip receiver.
Yeah.
So Eric, let me do this because I sort of want to hand it over to you and because you deal with automobiles, you deal with thoughts and calculations about this that you got dimensions that I don't even come close to knowing. And so I want to show you some of this stuff. This is something I've reserved inside the player. I'll bring your audio down. This is from RT as they cover the blockage of the Straits of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, and of course, what Iran has said. If they are flagged and they're doing dealings with Iran, with Israel or the United States or any of the allies, they will be hit.
New Supreme Leader's decision to continue the blockade of one of the world's most critical trade routes, the Strait of Hormuz, caused a new drop in world energy markets. The strait passes over 20% of global oil and liquefied natural gas. To offset shortages, the International Energy Agency, a grouping of mainly Western economies, is set to release a historic 400 million barrels of oil from its reserves.
IEA countries have unanimously decided to launch the largest ever release of emergency oil stocks in our agency's history. IEA countries will be making 400 million barrels of oil available. Global energy supply has been reduced by around 20%, and underlying market balances coming into this conflict were even tighter than in the case of oil.
The EU is also implementing a series of emergency measures, including price caps and subsidies for natural gas. Washington will provide the lion's share of oil released under IEA orders, a whopping 172 million barrels, but that covers just under 2 days of global consumption. At the same time, the U.S.
So that's 2 days global consumption, 8 to 9 days American consumption. Of course, RT is looking at it globally.
Trying to persuade its allies that the crisis is temporary, releasing footage claiming to show the sinking of Iranian vessels laying mines in the Hormuz Strait. However, markets mostly remain pessimistic as multiple cargo ships were struck off the Iranian coast a few days after Donald Trump urged commercial tankers to, quote, show some guts. Despite that, the U.S. Energy Secretary said Washington isn't to escort tankers through the strait, despite earlier comments to the contrary from the U.S. leader. Earlier, Qatar stopped most of its liquefied gas output, while Kuwait strongly cut oil production following strikes. Both are crucial global energy exporters. Let's discuss all this with economist and business newsletter publisher Eike Hammer joining us from Hanover. Many thanks for joining us on the program today. It's good to see you. So, Eike, just to give it to us straight, in your view, just how significant is the current global energy crisis?
It's extremely significant because the global economy is already anyway on the brink of collapse. And this energy crisis now could be the famous drop that makes the bucket to overflow. And what we are seeing now is that these high energy prices are increasing the inflation rate. The governments, especially in those heavily indebted governments in the Western world, are struggling to pay for the interest. They have to refinance it. So this inflation is an extremely bad circumstance now to keep the budgets somehow in check, and the economies are already burdened by heavy losses. And this the energy prices could be now the decisive extra loss for them that puts them out of business. We can see that especially the Chinese economy is hit by this special crisis from the Arabian Peninsula and the Japanese and Indian, because they are the main takers of this oil. The oil supply through the Strait of Hormuz is especially going to these areas, and they are facing even more severe problems. If China is going down, the European economy goes with it, because this is the main area where products from Europe are sold. So this is an extremely serious problem now.
Yeah, and
so Eric, I'll pause it right there. I'd love to get your opinions on that. And I have a couple thoughts. I've mentioned a couple of these things in the past regarding China and Russia and energy. But what do you think when you see a report like that, especially coming from RT?
Yeah. Well, it's quite worrisome. And we're already seeing some of the early warning signs. Interest rates are up on home mortgages. Inflation is going up again. And again, we were only 10 days now, not even 2 weeks into this thing. And my understanding is that crude oil prices have not risen this sharply since 1983. That's quite something to contemplate. And, something like, isn't it 33% of the world's oil flows through the straits? So if that's shut off, you can imagine 33%. Maybe it doesn't come directly to the United States, but the effects of that are going to come to the United States. And it's not sustainable. We don't have the cushion. People have been hurting in this country, the working and middle income. And I like to use that term, income, not class. I don't like the Marxist term class, because that implies, that you're rigidly defined. You can't escape this class that you're in.
Right. You're right.
I'm just talking about people, who aren't in the billionaire class. Not, the people at the apex of the pyramid. Sure, for them, the Dow is 50,000. That might be great for them. But for you and me and most people, having to spend another few $100s every month on groceries, it gets to the point of not being sustainable, particularly since it's a compounding problem. It's not just the one thing. You're having to pay more for gas. You're having to pay more for food. You're having to pay more. Your utility bill has gone up. Everything that you can think of is getting more expensive, particularly the necessities. And unlike the government, we have limited means to compensate. And you get to a tipping point, a certain point, where all of a sudden just the straw breaks the camel's back.
Right.
And then
right. In economics class, obviously, one of the things that I discuss with the students is the law of diminishing marginal returns. And, based on subjective marginal utility theory, which is that on the margins, we decide for ourselves how we value things. Is doing more of what I did before to make that thing and making more of that thing in my best interest? Or am I getting diminishing returns for doing that again and making more of those things? Maybe I'll channel my resources elsewhere. The problem that arises when government causes all these externalities that enter into our lives and increase our expenses, whether it's through inflation of the money supply, decreasing the buying power of our dollar, as we have a productivity curve that is only so steep, but the dollar inflation of the money supply is even steeper. Obviously, we're losing buying power because it's bidding up all those items. Or it's some external thing caused by nature that temporarily we have to now put money into actually acquiring something because it's more dearth, or because of government involvement in that area causing a depletion of a resource. Now we're going to not have the money to spend on something else. That's going to have an effect on employment. That will have an effect on political policy, where people will be calling for government handouts. That will have an effect on government spending. That will have an effect on money printing and borrowing, and it just continues the cycle. It's just amazing.
This could be sort of a Herbert Hoover moment. Trump is managing to single-handedly cast into disrepute everything that's associated with nationalism and populism, because it's tainted by dint of being synonymous with Trump himself. And I worry that there is going to be this tremendous backlash toward leftism, authoritarian leftism. Not that that's, somehow particularly worse than authoritarianism on the right. Yeah. But, I think it could be severe this time, just like it was after the stock market crash in 1929. And, just to say Hoover was kind of a curse word to the people of that time, who were destroyed by it, and who began to look to government and FDR, for salvation and succor. And I think that's what we're very possibly setting ourselves up for. And I just don't get it. Like, for me, it's like a binary thing, and I'm trying to figure this out. Is Trump evil, or is he insane, or is he both? Which is it? Because it's
amazing because the COVID lockdown stuff was so obvious before too. I mean, not only constitutionally, but it was so obvious in so many other ways that you could see what was going to happen when they did that. You could see what was going to happen to the economy. You could see how people's livelihoods and the supply chain was going to get destroyed. Then Biden comes in with all his tariffs and blocks against Russian energy. And then Trump doubles down on all that. And you say, look, you couldn't be screwing up the economy and making it more expensive for us to get what we could have gotten before. You couldn't have done that any better unless you had planned it, which I think it just makes no sense to me. And I can't imagine a guy like Scott Bessent saying, oh yeah, I think a really good recipe is to follow that Rand Corporation recipe from 2019, where they said, continue this squabble warfare, Russian conflict with Ukraine, this proxy war, and then the Europeans get them involved, so that hurts them more, and the United States is going to come out smelling relatively less stinky because we're still it's harming us. I got one more piece I want to ask you about, Eric, and this goes back to RT. Just a little bit forward in this video. I want to show you a little bit more of this commentary and then wrap this up with another piece from your website.
Thank God. He dropped or decreased the rate of emergency quantities that have to be stored before the winter, and he decreased it from over 90% to 75%. So the storages are already pretty empty here, and facing now this supply shortage we have, it's just dramatic.
That's over in Germany. That man is in Germany, so you can see. And it's amazing to me. I wonder what the Europeans must think of Donald Trump and people like Scott Bessent, because they know they've been brought into a room that's filled with bees. They've screwed up. They've gone along with the U.S. plan with Ukraine. They think maybe they're going to have a war economy. What do you think about that, Eric?
I don't know. Those people aren't a whole lot better than Donald Trump, except in the sense that they're not buffoons. I know most of them outright buffoons like Trump is, who looks like some kind of cartoon villain out of a bad Batman sequel. I try to analyze it from his point of view. Like, if he wants to be perceived as the savior of America, as this great sort of Teddy Roosevelt figure who brings back American greatness, everything that he's doing right now is guaranteed to undermine that, if not utterly destroy it.
Yeah.
And maybe he's totally delusional, and maybe he really does think that somehow this is going to be his great crowning achievement. Like, he's going to become the great viceroy of the Middle East. He's even said things like, I'm going to have a say in who the next leader of Iran is.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing hubris. It's just stunning. I want to go over and, in fact, touch base on that, because the hubris factor is something I wanted to bring up to the people in the chat as well. But I want to talk to you about this over at your site, Eric. And, I don't necessarily want to direct the comments, but I did want to ask the folks over there. There are a couple other pieces here where you've got breaking for a bag and then new blackout.
Yeah.
And which one would you like to mention to the audience?
I think that the breaking for the bag one, I try to inject some humor in the articles that I write and the topics that I cover, but there's a dark side to this. All right. So the gist of it is there was an MSNBC news story about a guy who was driving his SUV down the highway, and an empty trash bag wafted across the road. We've all had that experience, right? Well, the car equated that bag with something that had to be avoided, and so it slammed on the brakes because it has a technology called automatic emergency braking, which pretty much all the new cars have now. And the premise of it is that, well, we've got so many people who are too addled and inattentive; they don't notice that there's a need to stop. So what we'll do is we'll use cameras and software and computers to control the braking system. And if the driver doesn't brake when the car thinks it's necessary to brake, well, the car will brake, and voila, we'll avoid an accident. Except in this case, whoever was driving behind that guy might have run right into him. I've had that happen. A couple of years ago, I was driving one of these cars, and the brakes just came on for absolutely no reason at all. And it slammed on the brakes and came to a near stop in the middle of the road. And if I'd had a semi coming behind me at 70 miles an hour, because who expects to have somebody slam on the brakes for no reason in the middle of the road? Now, the really creepy aspect of this is that the federal government has issued a mandate that by 2029, all vehicles must be equipped with this AEB, automated emergency braking. And I think that could set a predicate for a ban on vehicles that don't have it, because what they'll do is they'll say, well, if every car on the road had AEB, then they'd all be following neatly in line. And if car A slowed down, then car B would know, because they're connected via vehicle-to-vehicle telematics. And they'd all slow down progressively, and we wouldn't have any accidents. But, oh my gosh, if we've got any old cars out there that don't have this technology, they're dangerous. They're a safety threat. So it could be another means by which they accelerate the removal from circulation of vehicles that aren't these completely controlled, completely connected vehicles that you're only the driver of, in the same sense that you drive the car at the amusement park when you sit, you get in the ride and you have the steering wheel, you feel like you think you're turning it, but of course it's not you that's actually directing where the vehicle goes.
Right. And then I think about all the used cars they got rid of with Obama's cash for clunkers idiocy, and just basically mother henning us as the little chicks walking along tethered to each other somehow. And as you mentioned here, what happens if you've got tumbleweed? What happens in all these areas because they run the roads? And again, I was talking with a young person, the daughter of one of the Free State Project members. I see these folks a few times a week, and we were just chatting, and they're libertarians, and they're like, "Yeah, we're talking about how bad the roads are." And I said, ideally, because we're all grouped together, this is the tragedy of the commons. So, if I have good driving skills, I could be on a road where we could go faster. Maybe they would ask to have an insurance policy that covers that sort of thing. Maybe the insurers might ask for more, or they would test me and they'd be sure that I was really good. They'd check out the roads, but I wouldn't have to be behind Granny going 20 miles an hour in the left lane when I'm trying to get somewhere, because the purpose for me to be on the road is not to look at the clouds. I want to get to my destination.
There's another aspect of this that I think is important too, which has to do with agency. What do I mean by that? Well, when I get in my old truck or my old muscle car, I'm fully responsible for what the car does. It's up to me to control the car. If I run into something, it's on me. It means that I wasn't paying attention. It means I was driving too fast for conditions, something along those lines. So not just legally, but morally, I'm culpable for the damage, right? Now, what if you're driving a car, and I put that in air fingers quotes, that has this technology, and the car slams on the brakes, and causes an accident. Well, it's not your responsibility. You didn't do it. Nonetheless, there's been damage and perhaps somebody's been killed. So how do we assess who is responsible for the damages? I think this is an important point, to taking away from people the thing that defines us as adults rather than children, that we're responsible for what we do.
Well, that's a really good point, especially if those cases go to court as a practical matter. How will they, I used the term a couple times this week, disambiguate from, they're going to have to break it open, find out about the tech, find out whether somebody paused themselves and caused an accident or swerve or something like that, or if it was the tech. And then what happens if it's forced on the car makers, just like the airbags were? Then what happens for the auto manufacturers and their liability? Will they be indemnified? Will they be indemnified too much, like the pharma companies? Oh man, what a
and how is it that they get to make these determinations? They're superseding our right, in my opinion, to be the ones that make those decisions. That we consciously understand what a risk is, and we decide whether it is a risk that's worth taking. And if we do take it, we accept that if there are negative consequences, well, we chose to do that, so we have to live with that. It's an entirely different thing than having some awful thing happen that you had no control over, and yet somehow you're involved in it. It's an icky place to be. Imagine being the driver of one of these cars, and through no fault of your own, the technology causes an accident, people get killed, and you're there. You have to live with that for the rest of your life, but you didn't do it. It's just a creepy thing.
Yeah, I'm reminded, Eric, I was looking, as you were saying that, as you're speaking, I'm looking at the photograph and I'm looking at the dirt, right? Because we used to have a ton of dirt roads around, they oil the roads every spring and all that stuff, summer and all that. But I was thinking about how, with all these other stories going on, how valuable it is to have a story that grounds once more into the lessons of libertarianism in history, in addition to warfare, and how you have these little wars about functional things that typically 9 times out of 10 are really just about, is it going to function efficiently and well based on what people would want? Well, the only way you can tell that is if you leave people alone and let them be free. So you need private roads. But then there's the other side of it, which is all this stuff that you're mentioning. These will be instances. These will be cases that will pop up. And I'm looking at that road thinking about how that, in a way, it's a visual metaphor to getting regrounded to all of the things that one can consider in an economics or an ethics class, with these day-to-day confrontations that these meddling people in government put us into.
I think the reason that we're in this situation, this is sort of a macro point of view, is that we've given over or had it taken away from us our autonomy. Our right to free association, our right to decide things for ourselves, as opposed to being regimented and managed by self-appointed experts who think that their way is the only way. And, whatever the consequences are, they're worth it in their minds. And we're the ones who will end up paying for that.
Yeah. Right.
This disconnect between decisions and accountability, getting back to Trump, here you've got this 80-year-old man sitting in the White House disposing of other people's lives with no consequences for himself at all, or his family.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing everywhere you look.
It's amazing. By the way, I hope you don't have a house that is in any area that Donald Trump wants to put a casino. All right.
Thankfully not.
It sounds frivolous, but I'll tell you a little bit later about eminent domain. And of course, we have.
I know the story. I know, and that gave us some insight into Donald Trump's character.
Oh yeah. No, but I mean another eminent domain story in my own town, which is pretty ridiculous. And of course, our town is the town that was next to, and you're aware of this, next to the town where they wanted to put an ICE detention facility and pay off a friend of the governor's. But that got too much publicity. I want to go over into the Rumble chat, Eric, because there's some great comments from inside the Rumble chat about standard transmission cars and a lot of really good, cool things. But Skunk Hollow mentions, remember the days when it was illegal to have a lit screen in your car?
Yeah.
And now it's all this screen stuff that, you know, you got to go looking at the screen rather than tactile things. Are they learning about that now? I know you mentioned that
it's worse than ever. I mean,
really?
Because you know, it was inevitable. You expect this to happen. You know, when they started putting the touch screens into cars, the one of the attractions of the touch screen is that you can layer and embed many things within the screen. In other words, you're not limited to just this one display, right? So in order to sell people on this stuff, oh, look, you can tap scroll through this and this and that. And they put, you know, a dozen different icons and a dozen little gizmos and gadgets that you can look at. Oh, you can watch in real time the air fuel ratio of your car and, you know, your angle and where you are on the compass. And, you know, I mean, it's endless. And it just encourages people to constantly be looking at the screen. And the worst part about it is that the simplest things, like turning the volume or changing the channel, you know, which are intuitive things with a knob, you know, you don't even have to look at it. You can just turn the knob, you know, okay, I know it's getting to where my station is. Now you have to go peck, 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 or you have to down this menu, pick news, talk, pop, so whatever, you know, to do that. And it speaks to the disingenuousness of their prattle. You know, they've been years for years saying, you can't tap on your cell phone in the car. That's dangerous. But it's okay to embed a cell phone in the car, a really big cell phone.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's just, and like they talk about safety, it's not about safety, it's about control. You know, and the difficulty, I think the reason they get away with it is because I do think most people are basically right in the head. Most people are normal, and they take at face value when they hear a government bureaucrat or some self-styled public citizen talking about, well, this will keep us safe, this will be good for us. They think, oh, okay, it's going to keep us safe, it's going to be good for us, not understanding that these are pathological people and that they are using that as a beard or a cover for what they really want, which is this sick lust to control us. It's really important to understand that.
You got it. And they have no incentive to try to make things safer at a lower cost, the way the competitive market would if that's what customers wanted, right? I mean, there's so many myriad things that people want. Eric, I'm going to show the website again. You've been so gracious to be here with us at this time. It's been an incredibly weird week, and positives and negatives, really. But, you know, from my personal perspective, again, connecting with you is you know, it's a really big deal for me, and I really appreciate it. And, you know, I want to show people the website again, and I want to just go over to see everybody here. I know Kudabing was talking. My last standard was an Audi A4 Quattro. It was fun. Oh, that must have been fun. That's cool. I wonder what the acceleration was on that. And I would love to be able to get an old car and fix it up. You know, we talk about this a lot, Eric, and just go driving around a track or a dirt track. My friends and I, you know, like I said, they used to work on Volkswagens. They basically turned them into dune buggies. So we'd be taking jumps with the things. It was, I mean, literally like Dukes of Hazzard. It was amazing. Oh man, it was great. Sometime later, I'd love to talk to you about, I remember when we were a kid, they would remove the mufflers and all the systems, and it would just be the engine, you know, that sort of thing. And I'd love for you to talk about how, you know, the catalytic converters and all these different types of things, how different those things were when they were forced onto engines and stuff like that versus just a straight engine, and how real gearheads love to have just straight engines they can mess with. If sometime, if you're free, I'd love that.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Eric, thanks, man. And by the way, the black cat, what's that cat's name?
That's Beezy.
Beezy with a B?
Beezy with a B. She's 21, if you can imagine that.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yep. We also call her here. Come here, sweetie. Come here. Oh, girl.
Oh, I heard her.
Yep. I'm discombobulating her. The Dowager Princess. Here she is.
I wish I could reach through and just pet her right now.
Yeah.
You know, like if you put her over to your right, it's like I'm petting her, you know?
Yeah.
That's
She's a
hilarious.
good girl. I've had her for a long time.
Oh, wow. Just awesome. Well, I'll talk to you off the air, of course, as you know,
cool.
And so on. But tell you a little bit about a new cat in our lives and the loss of our cat. And I know that, you know, a couple months ago, you lost your cat, and one of them. And so it is very difficult. And it does give one a perspective on how wonderful life is. And Anyway, thanks, Eric. You're
Thanks,
a
Sarge.
great guy. Thanks, dude. I
Appreciate
really can't wait to see you, dude. I can't wait to get, regardless of the plane expense ticket, when I get healthy enough, I can't wait to see you, dude. It's just going to be great.
Likewise. All right, amigo. We'll talk soon.
All right, bro. Take care. Watch out for the bad guys. Keep fighting. Fight the power.
You know I will.
All right, man. Take care.
Okay.
All right. Eric Peters is a good guy. What a good guy. He rocks. And we're going to do our little break and come back after we hear from Spock and McCoy. Get some more of your comments over on Rumble. I see Junior is there and Jason Barker is there. So we'll check in with you guys, and then we'll finish off the program with a couple other major stories as we do our Liberty Conspiracy Mind Meld and check in at Paramount Studios.